everyone, welcome to Legacy IAS. So this is our topic for today. Why don't any fruits or plant-based foods taste naturally salty? Now, this may seem funny or intriguing to you based on what kind of person you are. For me, this is very intriguing that everything that I taste from plants, I have eaten everything of different plants. Correct? I have eaten leaves, I have eaten fruits, flowers also, stem also, everything almost is never salty. Correct? So now, why is it so? So it starts with a simple question, but I will connect it beautifully, hopefully, to different dimensions. Okay, so that you understand the world around you a little better. Now, let's get started. First thing, see salt. If I talk about salt, now, why are nothing from plant are tasting salty? They must not be having salts. But salts are very important, correct, for us humans. For example, if we do any kind of heavy workout, exercise, running, whatever, after that, what we take? We take electrolytes. What are those? Those are basically dissolved salts in water. Why do we take this? Because it is very important for us. In fact, you might have heard that many celebrities who are regular in their workout, not so good with their sleep, and they are the imbalance that is caused in them of potassium, sodium, all these different kinds of things is actually leading them to have heart stroke. Okay, even at a very young age. So that important are salts for us humans. Okay, but not so much for plants. Now, understand why this difference exists. First thing. So if I talk about plants and if I talk about animals. Now, what is the core difference between plants and animals? That is also given as an argument that why you can eat plants but you should not eat animals by the vegetarians. Okay, the core thing is that plants don't feel pain. Might have heard this, or the better way is basically they don't have a nervous system and blood. So plants don't have a nervous system and blood, but animals do have it. So this is the core reason, first of all. Now, because they don't have a nervous system or blood, in animals, what has to happen? What sodium plus does here? So sodium is very important for transferring electrical signals. So basically any information that has to travel from any part of the body to the brain, and then from brain the action that has to be done by different body parts has to go through sodium. So sodium is that electrical signal which is transferring everything. That is why it becomes almost one of the most important ions that we have in our body. While for plants, because they don't have a nervous system, they are mostly dependent on simply potassium just to maintain the pressure. That sometimes there is less pressure, sometimes there is more pressure. If there is less pressure, then water and everything can flow in from the ground, and if there is more pressure, then it can go out. So mostly sodium is not needed here. In fact, here also potassium is also important to us. Now, in fact, if I talk just about sodium, so sodium can actually be in large quantities toxic to plants. Why toxic to plants? So what happens? Sodium can actually increase the osmotic stress. What is this? For us, it is simply the roots have to, through osmosis, roots get water out of the ground. Correct. Now, if there is excess of sodium, which is not needed by plants at all, if that is there, then the plants are not able to absorb water well. Because they are not able to absorb water well, what happens? The plants tend to start dying. That is why there are certain kinds of soils that are considered very bad for plants growth. Correct. This whole process is actually called, if there is more sodium or salts in the soil, it is called salinization of soil, that you see in Punjab and Haryana. Correct. So that is the reason, because plants don't want it at all, while animals, they find it essential. And that is why in animals you find salts. So where do you find salts? So in all those extracellular fluids. Okay, even the blood. If you taste blood, you must have tasted blood. Okay, okay, your blood only. If you got cut somewhere, then sometimes you suck on it. Okay, or sometimes if you don't do it, sometimes you eat something and your tongue gets bitten and then some blood is released. So from all this you understand that animals have those salts. Now, so this is clear. Now, one thing that you need to understand is there is an exception to it. What is the exception? So plant usually don't have salts because they don't need them, but this exception comes from natural adaptation of a certain kind of plants that are called halophytes. What are these? These are plants that grow around the sea, around the coast, correct? Because there the water is always salty. Now they have to somehow survive. So they have learned the mechanism of of having some salts inside them, and they are able to tolerate it. And that's why they have a certain quantity of salts in them. Correct? Fine till here. Now, if we talk more in detail about the animals, let's do more analysis of animals and salt. Now, if you see in animals, there are two kinds of animals. Correct? There is carnivores. For carnivores, it's not a problem. Why not a problem? Because carnivores do what? They eat other animals. Correct? Other animals will always have salts in them. So for carnivores, everything is fine. Tiger don't have to do anything else. What tiger only cares about? That hunt a deer in 3 4 days. I'm done. That is his whole life. Now, but what do herbivores do? Because they don't have, because they can't get salts from other animals, they are just eating plants. Now how do they work? See, so herbivores have different things at play. Okay, there is something known as geophagy. What is this? So basically these herbivores actually go around the jungle to find some rocks, some minerals, okay, from that they can lick, and by licking those rocks they are getting salts. Now that salt must have been deposited in those rocks many years ago, and they lick that to get the salts. This is also called salt licks. In fact, in places like Sahara Desert, where there are animals which are constantly in search of salts, so there is a whole mechanism that they follow to find salt. Okay, salt is so important. Now, the other thing is basically for, so which are naturally living in the oceans or around oceans. So there they can get plants from which they can get salts, and that is how herbivores get salts. But there is a problem. Okay, a real life problem. In the jungle it's fine, somehow they are able to find the minerals. In fact, sometimes they are not able to find it, and they start running towards the normal villages. Why? Because they are feeling the salt deficit. Their body cannot run without this. So they are not searching for food they have in their jungle. They are sometimes searching only for salt. Okay, now how does this practically? Basically, for example, in national park, wildlife sanctuaries, okay, biosphere reserves, what you have to do is basically, if there are not naturally such minerals found around, now if the national park, let's say, does not have naturally such rocks or minerals, now what the animals will do? They want the salt, correct? They are herbivore animals, they are not getting those things from the jungle. So what they will do? They will run towards the villages, and that is a problem. Correct? How do you contain them within the national park? So they actually make artificial salt licks, and they place it in some parts of the jungle where these animals can go and they can lick it and get their required salts. It is that important. Okay, so this is how herbivores are able to survive, and this is why you have to take care of this even in national park, wildlife sanctuaries, and everywhere. Okay, with this, I hope you understood everything about salt, how it interplays in plants and animals. Now, one more thing, which was the first question that remains, which is why they naturally taste salty, correct? But one more thing that I want to tell you is basically fruits generally sweet. Now, why are fruits sweet? The reason is fairly simple, because if you have eaten anything salty, correct, after you have your food or anything salty, you feel dehydrated and you want to drink more of water. Now, if you immediately start feeling dehydrated, you won't eat more of that food. That is why the salty, spicy food you can only eat to a extent, correct. Now, because the fruits are sweet, that is why the animals don't feel like that they are dehydrating, and they can eat more and more of it. Okay, eventually this helps in something known as seed dispersal, because plants do what? Plants want to disperse the seeds around so that their survival rates are better, and that is why they have, the evolution have made the fruits sweet, so that animals can eat it more and more, and they can disperse it at longer distances. Understood? Hope this entire flow is clear to you. That's it. Thank you.